What happens when you take the fundamentals of a survival horror game, blend them into a narrative, choice-driven adventure, and toss demons and love into the mix? Well, you get something akin to Sorry We're Closed. If that sounds unusual, it's because it is. Sorry We're Closed is not interested in being conventional. Rather, the game wears its bizarre world, characters, and gameplay mechanics with pride. But is Sorry We're Closed a third eye opening experience? Or does love truly bite? Let's find out in our full review. Real quick, we hope you've fallen in love with independent content here at the channel. If so, head over to patreon.com/idreamofindiegames and team up with the greatest indie gaming community of all time to take down the echo chamber via our Discord channel. You'll also get a shout out at the end of every video we produce, and even ad and sponsor free versions of our shows. Your new indie family awaits. Let's get the obvious out of the way. Sorry We're Closed is a highly unusual gaming experience. Its cinematic fixed camera and character movement call back to the early days of survival horror, while the narrative segments involve themes such as love, death, betrayal, and lust, just to name a few. The combat? A mix of classic Resident Evil games and Suda51's cult classic Killer 7. Music? A mix of avant-garde and electronica with a dash of hip-hop and folk. And oh yeah, you're cursed by a demon too. If that wasn't enough to scare you away, stick around to learn more. Players will take control of Michelle, a downtrodden convenience store employee who is struggling to come to terms with a failed relationship. Michelle's life takes an even more dramatic turn when, upon falling asleep in her apartment, she becomes cursed by a demon. Reality begins to twist and distort around her as she's transported into a bizarre hotel that's full of humans and demons alike. It is revealed that this hotel is home of the Duchess, who desperately seeks the love of a human in order to find fulfillment. Hoping that Michelle is the lover she's been waiting for, the Duchess now carefully watches and judges Michelle through the many trials and tribulations that she'll face across this 8-hour adventure. Throughout gameplay, expect to meet talking goats, putrid eyeballs, and the sketchiest of humans. If that weren't enough, demons roam freely across the city, your apartment, and the hotel, some only revealing their true forms through the power of your third eye. There is no shortage of diversity in Sorry We're Closed, with the Duchess putting an exclamation point on what is an unforgettable cast. Each character you come across, human or non-human alike, has a unique story and purpose of their own. You'll play a role in their narrative too, as at least half of the gameplay involves making choices that will impact their lives and ultimately affect the outcome of your adventure. The writing is sharp too, with plenty of colorful language. If it wasn't obvious, Sorry We're Closed won't be for the kiddos, but those who enjoy the occasional lust-filled romance novel will find plenty to fall in love with here. As much as I enjoyed the writing and characters in Sorry We're Closed, I must admit that the storytelling gets messy in spots, particularly towards the game's climax. There is a lot going on here, whether it be balancing Michelle's past and current relationships, angels that are falling in love, or a dream eater wanting to devour you for reasons. The game is full of subplots that will undoubtedly lead players down the rabbit hole and back again. If you are the type who enjoys trying to make sense of the seemingly nonsensical, this is the game for you. As I mentioned, Sorry We're Closed features two different aspects of gameplay. The narrative portions have you exploring the city and other areas, chatting with characters to progress the story forward. Some characters will want you to take on side quests for them that typically involve meddling in the affairs of others. You can visit a bar, record store, newsstand, and a food vendor all before retiring to your apartment, which is conveniently located around the corner from work. Exploring the Duchess's hotel plays out mostly the same way. This means that players should expect a good amount of dialogue, which slows the overall pace of the game. You'll do plenty of reading, and while as I mentioned the writing is good, the sheer amount of text could potentially wear down players who are eager to get into the survival horror segments. Expect to make plenty of choices too, ones that will make a difference in which ending you receive. When you aren't ruining someone's relationship or causing mischief, you'll be exploring dark corridors and seedy sewers in somewhat traditional survival horror fashion. There are bullets to collect, which are limited, puzzles to solve, water to drink, which replenishes your health, and monsters to either kill or avoid. If I had to describe these sections of the game to someone, I would say they fall somewhere between Silent Hill, Resident Evil, and the aforementioned cult classic Killer 7. Environments take on a rustic tone similar to Konami's flagship horror franchise. Creatures that you encounter look hellish, conjuring memories of evil sexy nurses and mannequins. The fixed camera calls back to the early Resident Evil games, as do the puzzles, which are pretty simplistic. These segments feel rather linear in nature, not even requiring a map to navigate, with the only real challenge stemming from the game's awkward combat system. Players wield an axe alongside two different guns. The axe is of course your melee weapon, and it never breaks. Guns, on the other hand, have limited ammo that you'll need to find throughout environments. When battling demons, prepare to be forced into a first-person perspective with your feet firmly planted in place, unable to move. This can be extremely frustrating, especially when multiple enemies gang up on you at once. While it's easy enough to switch between the third and first-person perspective, the combat feels clunky, and it can be difficult to get enough space between you and the enemy to strike them effectively. Combat is further complicated by having to switch visual perspectives. Michelle has a third eye ability that allows her to see things in a more pure form, but activating it also takes away your ability to run. With the third eye enabled, enemy weak points are revealed when they step into your limited radius. From there, you'll need to blast those points, sometimes in pretty quick succession, in order to defeat the enemy. Using the third eye isn't required, but it is generally a more efficient way to dispose of your foes. Honestly, when combat isn't forced, often your best course of action is just to avoid it and run. If you do have to fight, your greatest challenge becomes aiming, particularly while using a controller. Because weak spots appear on different areas of the enemy, you'll need to quickly scroll from one hit point to the next if you hope to survive. All the while, you'll be frozen in place as your attacker batters away at you, often dealing an absurd amount of damage. While you can restore health by drinking water, navigating the menu mid-combat is less than ideal, and unless you turn on the unlimited water option, there is always the possibility that you don't have any H2O on hand. Yes, the third eye can temporarily stun your enemies, but not as long as you would hope. The aiming is frustrating to say the least, remedied only by using a mouse at the sacrifice of using your controller, which I personally found to be better for general exploration. So despite full controller support being available, the combat system doesn't feel like it was built with a controller in mind. That's not going to be an issue for those of you who are comfortable with keyboard and mouse, but as someone who grew up on consoles, I found the control scheme a bit inconvenient. I honestly was wielding an ungodly combination of controller and mouse throughout my gameplay to get the job done. A gamer's gotta do what a gamer's gotta do. The third eye ability has other uses, such as revealing the true forms of demons, and even seeing doorways that otherwise couldn't be seen. It also helps to solve a few puzzles, but the coolest part about this feature is how it alters the settings and environments. It's pretty incredible to watch rusty spikes and debris morph into passable hallways. The developer basically had to create two forms of every area, which is incredibly impressive. In fact, the visuals of Sorry We're Closed are dazzling across the board, but more on that in a bit. Sorry We're Closed is a fairly challenging game, though not overwhelmingly so. While I mentioned my frustrations with the combat engine, things really come to a head during boss encounters. I can't say I had very much fun battling these foes, as the stiff movements simply don't play nice with scripted enemy patterns. Most of these encounters play out in similar fashion as well, requiring you to charge up a heartbreak shot which is earned by dealing a set amount of damage. Really, it all comes back to not being able to move and shoot at the same time, a decision that holds this game back. While I respect the developer trying to pay homage to classic survival horror combat like we saw in Resident Evil, it's simply not effective in the world of Sorry We're Closed. Fortunately, players will be able to use built-in accessibility features should things become too punishing. Save rooms are also prevalent throughout gameplay, with autosaves preventing you from losing too much progress with an untimely death. Upgrades can also be purchased using artifacts that you find through hidden levels. These artifacts are traded for in-game currency to improve your gun's damage output, the amount of health you have, and more. Visually, Sorry We're Closed has a retro vibe that reads somewhere between Dreamcast and PS1 era graphics. The character models scream more PS1, while the environments bring to mind memories of the often forgotten Illbleed, a 2001 horror release for the Dreamcast. It's a unique blend of generations that fans of retro polygonal graphics will greatly enjoy. Blocky animations, low-res textures, and a gritty underground aesthetic bring the world to life. If you weren't a fan of this style before, Sorry We're Closed won't change your mind, but if you are a retro gaming enthusiast or a fan of this art style in general, it's hard not to fall in love with how the game looks. Sound design in Sorry We're Closed is phenomenal. The soundtrack is an impressive fusion of genres, including everything from hip-hop to pulse-pounding electronica. The music is often chilling and sets just the right tempo for whatever the scene presents. When battling bosses, you may even be greeted with full-on vocal tracks. All of this is further brought to life by disgusting sound effects such as a creepy eyeball slowly opening itself up. I will say that voice acting could have potentially brought more life to these characters, but as always, no voice acting is better than bad voice acting if it isn't in the budget. As far as performance is concerned, Sorry We're Closed ran without issue at 120 FPS and 4K resolution on my PC. I only encountered one small bug where I was trapped in a corner and couldn't move, but for the most part it played like a well-polished product. I didn't encounter any crashes during my time with the game either. Sorry We're Closed is a flawed but fascinating title that is quite ironically open to breaking genre conventions and blending visual styles. While I didn't love the combat, I respect what the development team has attempted to capture here. The story is quite a wild ride. Even if it ultimately becomes a bit convoluted, the writing is pretty sharp for the most part. Its bleak world isn't void of humor, with characters that manage to get their hooks under your skin, sometimes even against your will. While it won't be for everyone, Sorry We're Closed feels destined to become a cult classic, much like at least one of its inspirations, and its ambitions should be applauded. In a gaming world that often plays it safe, Sorry We're Closed stands out as something new and exciting, and that's worth celebrating. Here at I Dream of Indie Games, we believe that games are so much more than a number, which is why we have our wonderful 3 Genie Lamp tier system. A bronze lamp represents a good game with quite a few issues, a silver lamp represents a great game with a few nagging issues, and then there's the elusive golden Genie Lamp of approval for those games that simply belong in your indie gaming collection, no ifs, ands, or buts. We also have the Rusty Lantern for those mediocre titles that have a faint glimmer of hope, and the dreaded Indie Krampus for the ones you should avoid. And with all of that said, I'm going to award Sorry We're Closed the Silver Genie Lamp of Approval.